Hello, boys and girls. It is the 14th of August. Can't believe summer's almost. That sucks. Another walking the dog moment. So, yeah, let's talk about Kursk. First of all, what was Kursk about, or what is Kursk about? Nobody really knows. The Ukrainians keep giving different answers, and their American owners can't get a hold of them to find out. Never mind that Lieutenant General Anthony Agato is sitting there and manually controlling all of this out of Kiev. As he was sent there previously for manual controlling it out of Germany. He was sent directly into Kiev, so he and his staff are there directly working with. Read that as in controlling the situation, planning and doing everything short of execution. That comes down to the Ukrainian meat. So on one side they were saying that they were going to go after the nuclear power plant. Of course they couldn't hold it, but the Kursk nuclear power plant they didn't get to within 25 kilometers, which is a pretty damn good distance. So what they did, the most they could have rushed it and tried to do a terrorist act. You know, the way they bomb Zaporozhye nuclear power plant constantly. The other alternative was they were going in there to capture Russian land for negotiations. Okay, first of all, let's look at it from the Russian point of view. So you're going to take Russian land to bargain for other Russian land. Because those four oblasts that joined, I'm not even talking about Crimea, those four oblasts that joined are now constitutionally bound. And there's no bargaining. There's no bargaining. The problem is the West still thinks Putin's some kind of dictator. And he just do whatever willy-nilly he wants. You know what America does with its constitution. Just willy-nilly does whatever the hell it wants. And screw the states and screw the citizenry. Well, no, you can't do that. And unlike the UK and other countries that just ignore whatever constitution or constitution-like documents they have, like the Magna Carta, Russia can't do that. And Putin is a lawyer. And is very legalistic in all of this. So capturing chunks of Russian land to bargain for other chunks of Russian land does not work. Additionally, so their plan is, because Trump made these threats that as soon as he gets there, you know, tongue wagging as usual. No, I'm not a big Trump fan. Of course, it really doesn't matter who comes to power in the U.S. I'm not a Biden or Harris fan, for God's sakes. But it doesn't matter who comes to power in the U.S. It's all the same thing. The deep state owns everyone, and the ones that they don't own have absolutely zero chance of getting anywhere. So there's no use in believing that, well, it's just the next election. If you're anything older than 20, you've been here the entire life. Oh, well, next time. You know, but it's a good thing most of the American population is that ignorant to believe this kind of crap. There are quite a few people that have woken up to the fact that the game's in, it's always been fixed, and there's never going to be a next time. Next time is just going to be a repeat of the previous times, maybe even more arrogantly. And whether or not Trump wins is irrelevant because nothing will change. And Trump's wagging his tongue about, oh, I'll bring peace within 3 days. Yeah, okay. And either Zelensky will come to the table, or I'll cut all aid to him, or Putin will come to the table, or I'll flood Zelensky and the Ukrainians with more weapons than they know what to do with. Well, first of all, sure, okay. What weapons has the U.S. got left to flood? Munitions, not a whole lot. I mean, Raytheon produces 660. That's after increasing by 10%. Patriot missiles a year. They're literally put together by hand. Okay? Figuring if everything went to Ukraine, figuring around an average of 2 missiles per target, 660 missiles, do the math. That's about 330 targets. That's less than a week's worth at the rate things are going over Ukraine right now. And then there's nothing for the year. U.S. has no flexibility in its industry. It has to set up the industry. For that, there has to be massive investment. Because these for-profit companies aren't going to spend billions of dollars setting up manufacturing just so they don't have any orders in a year or 2 years. It doesn't pay off. Additionally, most of the ordinances and most of the equipment that the U.S. buys have gone up almost 30% in price over the last 2 years. That's a nice little inflation number, don't you think, girls and boys? But that's your great-great-grandchildren will be paying that one off. in poverty for the next 3 generations, 4 generations, or the collapse. So they'll just drive all of you in poverty now. But like I said, he can try to flood Ukraine with all the weapons he wants. Problem with Ukraine, even if he could flood it with all the weapons he wants, is who's going to drive those weapons. And I'm talking about the M1 tanks, or maybe he'll actually send something better than just the M1 with an upgraded 120mm main gun. Maybe he'll send in the M1A1s. So take a good look at that multi-layer combine armor with the depleted uranium in it, because those haven't been sent. Or maybe even the M1A2s. I think those the U.S. is saving to feed Europe when Europe decides to go genocide itself under, as Americans say, suicide by Russian. Suicide by cop, in this case suicide by Russian. And Europe's is committing suicide, so they might as well just get it over with and just die. There's plenty of new people in Europe who are going to be very happy to take your wives and your daughters and use them for the next generation of whomever, but not you. Most Europeans are still too stupid to figure that out. Incredible how stupid people can be. They're being genocided in front of your own eyes. Slow genocide and heading straight to a fast genocide. And you still can't get the point. Well, that's humanity for you. As Aristotle said, tyranny rises up from amongst the people. Almost always. It's some kind of demagogue that rises from the people that brings the true tyranny. He comes to save them and instead pushes them down and makes them into slaves. And gets himself and his cohorts rich. Well, like the average EU or EU bureaucrat, EU administrator, EU politician. If you can even call them politicians. So anyways, which is ridiculous in itself if you think about it. If Trump's going to do this, Trump won't be in power until January, right? January 20th, if he wins, if he even lives long enough. Because if you think this is the only attempt that's going to be on his life, no. There are plenty of other attempts. And that's for internal American politics, not external. External doesn't ever change, not really. Trump created this mess. Well, he accelerated it anyways. Obama created the initial mess, and then Trump started arming the Nazis in Kiev. Quite happily, as he said, nobody's been as hard on Putin as I have. As he sent in billions and billions of dollars of aid to out-and-out Nazis. So that's Trump's triumphal accomplishment for the day. Well, he beats his chest. Seems to forget that little part, doesn't he? It's American politicians, what can you say? They're nothing if not lying, cheating pricks. With very, very few exceptions. And those few exceptions never get very far. Because they are the exceptions. So anyways, so yeah, if they were going to grab that land to try to trace, they'd have to hold that land till at least January, or maybe December at least. Now, from the Russian point of view, and from my point of view as a military political expert, there's a Chinese saying, when the enemy's committing a mistake, don't interrupt them. So what the Ukrainians did, just so we all understand this very, very pointedly, they took most of their best reserve, plus they stripped down a lot of good units off of the front line to form this attack group. And they launched this attack, so they took the reserve from the deep rear, where it was hard to get to them, hard to find them, hard to get to them, and they brought them all up and into Russia, and formed themselves a nice little, what is called a kill sack. They are in their own kill sack. You can't make this shit up. I mean, you've got to be seriously stupid to do it the way they did it. So they burst through, created a kill sack, where they're now being shot at from 3 sides, and 4 sides, because Russian aviation, because they're within the umbrella of Russian aviation, Russian long-range rocket artillery and long-range tube artillery is now hitting them in their rear, or the border area between Kursk and Sumy oblasts, or provinces, through which all of their equipment is traveling through. So they are, while maybe personnel-wise they still have plenty of personnel, equipment-wise, I mean heavy equipment, they're losing massively. I mean, they've lost so much heavy equipment, especially American-made heavy equipment, and the British and everything else they got. They've lost in 8 days almost what they lost in 3 months of the failed last summer offensive. Yes, they took a lot more land, but they can't hold it. You know, when you got 10 guys holding one house, that's a force. You got 10 guys holding 10 houses, not so much so. When you got 10 guys holding 20 houses, that's the point, is you can grab a lot at first until the line stabilizes, but can you hold? Because the further you go out, the further you stretch your logistics, the further you stretch your ability to consolidate, the more territory you have to control. Just the other day, actually earlier today, late yesterday, the 82nd and 80th Airborne Brigades were removed by the Ukrainian army from the Kursk theater. They retreated them. Why? Because they were attrited past combat capability. So we're talking about 40 to 50% attrition rate. That's 40-50% dead and heavily wounded, unable to fight any further, maybe even more. I'm sure they were losing men as they were leaving. Meanwhile, the Russian defensive lines are only strengthening as more and more reserves. Now, when you say, why couldn't Ukraine just overstretch Russia? Because Russia was holding in reserves 300,000 men. 300,000 men. Let that sink in. And that's not the entirety of the Russian army. There's about 800,000 men involved in all of this. 300,000 of them were sitting in reserve. 500,000 were on the front lines. So that leaves another approximately 700,000 waiting for NATO. When NATO decides to do the stupid and start self-destruction or suicide by Russian. So, yeah, so we got this kind of situation right now. Sure, they can continue to push for a while, and in the West, they've already been getting a lot of pushback. In the East, they try to open up a new front. In the South, going around Russian defenses, they got some success. They launched a pretty big column into Giri, which is a town that's about 20 kilometers deep in. And the Russian forces there ambushed them point blank. And I've had videos of guys shooting RPGs into the sides of passing Ukrainian armored vehicles from maybe 5-7 meters. You know, so we're talking about 20 feet, 15-20 feet, and they're shooting basically point blank RPGs right into them, burning all those Yukis up and those NATO mercs that are dying in there too. So I guess there may be a few more car accidents or command or officers in NATO who take walks in the mountains like in France and fall into gullies or have sudden heart attacks like a certain Marine general, and so on and so on. I'm sure there'll be plenty more of that, where that came from. So that's the idiot circle or circus that's going on right now in the Kursk area. As far as demoralizing the Russian people, which is as ludicrous as it sounds, but the great American hope that there'll be a revolution in Russia, you know, and a miracle happens through whatever devil the Western leadership prays to, and they'll get their way. Not going to happen again. In fact, Russian people are mobilized a lot. Never mind all the extra horseflies, all the extra people that are volunteering. And we haven't had a second mobilization. If we put in a second mobilization, we need to, honestly, we should. We can mobilize easily another 500,000 men, and without a major hit, any kind of hit to the economy, for the most part. You know, my wife and a lot of other women spent 5 days racing around collecting aid, and all that aid is on the way to the Kursk region for all the refugees that had to be pulled out. Now, the Ukrainians have done a lot of mass murder, especially the drone operators, because they were hitting civilian cars out for one and only purpose, and that's to massacre civilians. Plenty of videos out of that. I will load a video onto that at the end of this, at the end of my video, showing the results of Ukrainian attacks on a highway and lots of burned out cars, civilian cars. So a lot of those Ukrainians aren't going to get taken prisoner. and Americans and Brits that are in that area, you're all going to die. I mean, that's how it is. Nobody's going to take you prisoner. You're going to get a controlled shot in the head if you're wounded. That's just kind of what's going to happen, because this is payback. Payback is usually a bitch. So if you're there and you want to spend your ill-gotten gains, I would suggest getting your ass out of there real quick while you still have an ass attached to your back end. Yeah, horseflies are bad around here this time of year. So yeah, so that's the situation there. So the enemy's basically put his head in a noose. He's put himself in a kill sack, and he's being treated on left and right. There has been counts of up to 1,500 vehicles already destroyed in the first 8 days, and lots and lots and lots of videos of them getting whacked. So maybe the infantry still left. They're not supportable, because if your positions are 15, 20 kilometers apart from each other, and that's not 15, 20 kilometers you just freely walk. It's 15, 20 kilometers, you're still going to get whacked by drones, artillery, and everything else if you get noticed. Try supplying those people with weapons, with ammunition, with food. Even if they live off the locals, okay, they're still going to need ammunition. And try bringing that ammunition 20 kilometers in by foot for a company-sized element, or even a platoon-sized element. Not an easy thing to do at all, especially when you're constantly under fire and you're constantly getting hit by Russian groups operating in the area and so on. So this is just a matter of time. Ukraine continues to push more and more troops in, even though the Eastern Front is collapsing. Chasiv Yar is probably going to fall within the next 2 weeks to 2.5 weeks, and that is your main linchpin logistics point. Chasiv Yar falls, a very large chunk of the second and first line of defense collapses. Russia is right now, Russian forces are breaking into the second line of defense, and there's really not enough Ukrainian troops to hold it, because the best troops have all been stripped out for this Kursk sing-along, run-along. So there you go with that. And yes, the clown world in this absolutely is and will be, well, we don't know anything about this. We need to call the Ukrainian command, and they're not picking up the phone. Okay, sure. Putin has said flat out, not only is there going to be no negotiations, Ukrainian troops within Russian territory are considered terrorists, and terrorists will be exterminated. So anybody in a Ukrainian uniform or working from the Ukrainian side, or let me rephrase that, on the American side in Ukraine, in Russian territory, will be exterminated. So any of those NATO officers that may be riding along, they're going to have a bleak future. They're going to be running for their lives, or they're going to be rotting in the sun. And it is a hot sun down there right now. So that's how that is. We're continuing to escalate, obviously. Everything's continuing to escalate to World War III, which, you know, honestly, it already has started. It's just a matter of what form it's going to take on. And more likely, the really big flash is going to be down Iran and Israel. So the sides are lined up, and the big fight's getting ready to happen. And I'm sure there's going to be a draft. Because look, the U.S. Army hit a new anti-record. 20% obesity rate last year. That's right. Not only are you full of transvestites, homosexuals, and women in combat roles that are incapable of carrying their own weight, now you have 20% obesity. Not only can they not carry their own weight, they can't even move relatively fast. But bullets do have a tendency of ripping off a lot of that weight in a permanent type solution. So, you know, the year before, the anti-record was 16% obesity rate. Last year, it was 20% obesity rate. And think about that. The obesity rate of the armed forces of the United States of America. I've been watching some of these videos of boot camp, Navy boot camp as a joke. My God, the fat bodies that are going to be trying to teach these recruits. I mean, seriously, if that's the best face you can put forward, might as well just go surrender now at that rate. But, yeah, okay, that's the armed forces of the United States right now. Diversity hires. What else can you say? Well, they're not even diversity hires. They're the drags that they can get in. Even with a crappy economy, people still don't want to line up to die for adventures, for Lindsey Graham's Light in the Loafers, Lindsey's orgasmic feelings of triumph, because you know the combat veteran that is Lindsey Graham, who's screaming, "Yes, this is what we wanted. Yes," in Kiev. "Yes, go forward. Yes, my children. Oh, yes, yes." You know, Lindsey Graham. He makes America proud, I'm sure. But he keeps getting reelected, so plenty of still brainwise, stillborn people who are still voting for him. Obviously. South Carolina should bury its head in shame and chop it off for having to re-elect that thing. And that is what represents South Carolina. The South has fallen, really has fallen. The South has been occupied since 1865, but morally the South has collapsed. If that is what represents a state like South Carolina. Oh well, what can you say? It is what it is. So Middle East is going to be a mess. Israel cannot hold off a combined air assault from Iran and Hezbollah. The Lebanese army will more likely be involved too. They're not a very strong force, but it is additional troops. This has a very big chance of drawing in Egypt, has a very big chance of drawing in the Turks, and all against the Israelis and the Americans and the British. And if that happens, the British bases on Cyprus are going to get smacked. So that's going to be interesting. All you can say, I'm getting more popcorn. You know, maybe if the U.S. had actually done something to curtail psychopathic Netanyahu from mass murdering civilians. Oh, the same Netanyahu who came before the U.S. Congress, bought and paid for, and gave the declaration that he is leading the most humanitarian urban war ever. And only once it was the IDF responsible for the deaths of civilians, where they hit a Hamas base that had fuel stashed there too, and because of that 20 civilians died. They just killed 100 in one in one mosque school attack. Just one. And if you've never seen the photos, I would go take a good look at what's left of those children, women, elderly. And that's just one hit. Lancet, which is one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, and probably the most prestigious medical journal in Europe, flat out came out and said that they estimate about 200,000 dead, if you count the people that are still buried. Very well, yeah, not buried alive anymore, but buried in there. So that's the situation. So not much of a clown world, especially when people like that are setting the agenda. Well, the U.S., it's no longer even the dog, the tail wagging the dog. It's the tail leading the dog wherever the hell it wants to and dragging it behind. Not that the dog isn't willingly going. It's just that you people who are listening to this are the ones that are going to have to pay for that. Even as they shove down Agenda 2030, Net Zero, and all the other shit down your throat. And the throat of your children are going to be left orphaned. And that is if we hopefully, very much so hopefully, don't go nuclear. So that's the situation. No, Russians are not going to revolt against the government. No, Russians aren't going to overthrow it. No, the military isn't. As a matter of fact, now that Belousov is in charge of the military, there's been a serious cleaning going up. And, there's been now 5 generals arrested so far, plus others, for corruption charges, and some pretty large corruption charges. So there's a cleanup going on, a reorganization. Just in time, absolutely just in time for when NATO decides to get really funky and test things out. So again, hopefully some sound minds will prevail, but I grow less and less trusting of that wish every single day that this goes on. So that's the situation at the moment. And you know, I'll tell you this. Because the Ukrainians tried further south to break through. They couldn't get through the Dragon Teeth. They were treated as they were moving up. They got up their Dragon Teeth. They're trying to blow them up and clear them. And they got wiped out by artillery and by flying ordnance, like the Lancet. And in this area of Kursk, they had absolutely almost nothing on the border. You know, I'm cold-blooded enough. I would be willing to risk the sacrifice of some amount of civilians to lure the Ukrainians in. And I think that's exactly what happened. they were given an opportunity. Their American masters were given an opportunity. They threw in the biomaterial called the Ukrainian soldier into this grand adventure, and now they are surrounded, getting hit from all sides, and they will be exterminated. Even though they may still be pushing through in certain areas, they cannot win, and the resistance there just grows on a daily basis. After all, they've got stretched lines. They're getting hit constantly by air dominance and artillery dominance from the Russian side, and Russia does not have those types of issues, long lines of supply. So that's a big problem for the Ukrainians. It's a huge problem for the Ukrainians. But that's how it is. All right, boys and girls, have fun. God bless.